Let's turn our attention back to politics and look at the year that was and a few predictions for 2024. Joining me is Peter McGorran, former minister in the Howard government, now senior advisor at Bondi Partners, and Simon Banks, former Labor advisor, now managing director at Hawker Britain. Great to see you both. Before we get to the winners and losers of the year and where to for 2024, let's start with the news of the day with Richard Marles, the Deputy Prime Minister, confirming on this program a bit earlier that they won't be sending a ship to the Red Sea. Simon, and then Andrew Hastie also told me a bit earlier that they should reverse that and said that Mr Marles has got his head under the doona. It's been quite a stoush to finish the year.
Well, I think I can understand the opposition, wanting to differentiate. But as you know, Kieran, in fact, the decision to deprioritise the Middle East in terms of Australia's naval operations took place under the previous coalition government in 2020. It was confirmed in the Defence Strategic Review, which the opposition basically supported. Australia's priority is in the South China Sea. I love the opposition running around talking to us about how 12% of the world's trade passes through the Red Sea, and it's a really important trade corridor, but 40% of the world's trade passes through the South China Sea. That is Australia's priority. That is what we've been doing in the region, and you only need to look at the exercises we've been running with the Philippines to show just what an important priority that is for Australia. So we've got a limited defence resource, Navy resource. We have to deploy it as best we possibly can. The South China Sea is comfortably Australia's strategic priority. We're still contributing, though, to this operation. We've already got some troops over there. We're going to be sending some additional headquarters staff. And in fact, Australia's contribution is going to be comparable to, and in fact, superior to, some of our very like-minded allies.
Peter, as someone who's not just been a politician and you've been a diplomat yourself based in the United States, how will the US see this? Will this cause concerns in the corridors of power in Washington that Australia hasn't sent a ship?
Undoubtedly. You can't be a fair weather ally. So we're happy to take 3 of their nuclear submarines over the next decade that they could never have envisaged until recently ever conferring that privilege on an ally. Look, I can see both. I can see the arguments both for and against, but I'm not buying this that we're so committed to the South Pacific that we can't spare a ship for the Red Sea. I venture to suggest, and I'm happy to be proved wrong, I don't think we'll even have a vessel throughout the South Pacific over the next few months. They all seem to be returning to base in their traditional Christmas break. But leaving aside the foreign policy emphasis, is it on the Indo-Pacific region or is it on one of the major shipping lanes in support of our ally? I think the hard, brutal truth is we can't send a ship. We don't have one of our war vessels able to counter the inevitable drone attacks which the Houthis are now expert in. I don't think we could send a ship into harm's way. So that, to me, is the bigger issue, and I think that has to be addressed and is a testament to years of neglect.
Peter, let's look at the year in federal politics and for the nation. Who would you say were the winners and the losers of 2023, Peter McGorran?
You'd have to say the incumbent government is the loser. At the beginning of the year, it seemed to be in an impregnable political position. It's lost 3 state premiers since then. Say what you like about Palaszczuk and Daniel Andrews and Mark McGowan. The fact is they were titans in their own territory, and they've all been replaced by lacklustre successors, with the possible exception of Cook in WA, who seems to have a deft hand for politics. And then you had the voice referendum. But even before the defeat of the voice referendum, and we spoke about it often on our regular appearances, there was a decline in support because of the cost of living issues. It's not terminal. And as we discussed last week, it could be midterm blues. But there's some worrying signs for the government. It's going to be much harder now for Prime Minister Albanese to make up for lost ground. He does not seem connected with the electorate, which is genuinely suffering a cost of living crisis.
So that's the loser. Simon Banks, who would you have in that category for the year?
Look, undoubtedly, I think the Yes campaign was the biggest loser of the year. I think they were warned plenty of times in the lead up to the campaign that they really needed to get their act together to coordinate a positive campaign and to give Australians a really positive and constructive reason to vote yes. Ultimately, they didn't achieve that. I think, whilst I was obviously a supporter of it, very disappointed by the result, I don't think you can look past Senator Nampijira Price. I think she marked herself out as a very effective campaigner on those issues. Admittedly, she's largely gone missing in action since the referendum, and there really hasn't been any follow-through by the coalition on the really bread and butter issues that need to be solved in Indigenous communities that the referendum highlighted, if you like. I think that's going to be a challenge. The current government is getting on, probably in a quieter way than it intended to, addressing those concerns. But that issue has largely fallen off the political radar. So I think, they're the biggest sort of winners and losers. But when I think around, who are the people who have sort of done their job and who I think the Australian people might have noticed in some unusual ways, I'm going to pick one a little bit out of the usual. I think when you have a look at the Senate, you look at David Pocock. I mean, yes, admittedly, he's got a balance of power role in the Senate, but he's actually stepped up and I think in a very thoughtful way exercised that power. He's been very circumspect about the issues that he's chosen to do it on. He's been very deliberate about the way that he's done it. He hasn't overreached in terms of his demands from government. I think he's been a very astute political operator. And look, I mean, most of Australia won't get to vote for him at the next election. He's a Canberra politician, as you know. The people of the ACT really do appreciate him. But I think if you ask Middle Australia, you've got this senator making these decisions. What do you think of his performance? I think most people would say, well, that guy seems pretty reasonable and pretty fair-minded.
Peter McGauran, where to for 2024 then? What's your prediction for the new year?
I think Peter Dutton has been the biggest individual winner of the year, especially given his earlier polling position. He hasn't solved the Liberal Party's problems by a long shot, Kieran. They're just too profound. They're structural, they're financial, they're personality-based and so on, but he's managing them. And that's the first step to getting the right people in the right state divisions and recruiting the right candidates. Next year, it's going to be the economy. There are obviously volatile, unpredictable world conflicts, both in the Middle East and in the Ukraine. And there's the American election, which is just going to, apart from its entertainment value, puerile as it might be, it is a fundamental economic and strategic importance to Australia. So I think next year is going to be as full on and challenging as this year in both economically and politically.
Peter, I look forward to your contributions throughout the new year. Merry Christmas to you, and Simon, same to you. Merry Christmas, and we look forward to reconvening in January, gents. Thanks.
Merry Christmas, both.